Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck, and today we're going to be taking a look at my Gibson ES335 from 1962. Well, bits of it anyway. Now, before we delve into today's video, I just want to give a very quick shout out to my band Cardinal Black's first ever North American tour coming up this August. We announced the tour 2 days ago. You may recall last summer, I actually made a couple of videos on the experience. We came over to the US for the first time ever to kind of dip our toes in the water, as it were, to kind of see what temperature it was, and we're absolutely blown away by the response. Setting out the Bassman East in Nashville and the Troubadour in Los Angeles before we even touched down in the US was honestly a bucket list moment for me. It really was the stuff of dreams, and as a consequence, there's been a couple of developments going on behind the scenes. First among which is the fact that we've signed to Nashville-based record label 30 Tigers, joining the likes of Jason Isabel, Steve Winwood, Blackberry Smoke, Smashing Pumpkins, Alanis Morissette, Lucinda Williams, and the Red Clay Strays, to name but a few. But we've also signed to booking agent WME in North America, again alongside the likes of Adele, Chris Stapleton, Gary Clark Jr., Paolo Nutini, Teddy Swims, and Zach Bryan. So suffice to say, it's been a pretty hectic couple of months, all of which have culminated in this North American tour announcement. We're going to be going coast to coast, kind of dipping our toe into Canada as well, which we're really excited about. But we're going to be playing some incredibly cool, iconic, intimate venues on this run. We're incredibly excited for it. Tickets go on sale today, actually, at 10 a.m. Central Time or 4 p.m. UK time. So if you are interested in coming to see us, I'll stick all the relevant ticket links down in the description box below. Hopefully see you there. But anyway, back to the guitar. Now, rewind to last year, November 2024, and we were actually in between a couple of European tour dates with Miles Kennedy. That has a relevance I'll come back to in a minute. But I had a message via Guitar Auctions at Gardner Holgate, a specialist guitar auctioneer in Corsham here in the UK, asking if I was up for popping in and filming some videos for them. The usual video guy wasn't available. Now, as gigs go, it's a pretty good one. It's a pretty easy one, if I'm honest. You go in, you play some incredibly cool, old, vintage, interesting guitars on camera, and get on your way again. And this particular catalogue was also a pretty good one. We had some 50s Gibsons, we had some 1920s Martin acoustics, we had one of Eric Clapton's old Guild acoustics, we had some immaculate pre-CBS Fenders, and then we had this Gibson ES335 from 1962, or as I referenced earlier, at least some of it is from 1962. Not as hard as this may be to believe, when you are filming with that many guitars, it was maybe 25, 30 over the course of the day, you do cease to pay any attention to what you're playing after a certain amount of time. It becomes a little bit like a factory line. It's guitar in, minute and a half, 2 minutes tops filming, guitar back, guitar in, guitar out, guitar in, guitar back, etc., 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 ad nauseum. It really is a bit of a laborious process in the end, as very easy gigs go, I guess. But something immediately leapt out of me about this particular 335. Before I'd even plugged it in, just to check it was in tune, strummed a big open E chord, and it just absolutely bellowed back at me. I've been very fortunate in my time to play some very cool ES335s. There was a 64 that left the factory the same day as Eric Clapton's. There was an immaculate 59 that I played in the Cardinal Black video. There was my dad's 66. Even my 90s Orville by Gibson is a brilliant guitar. But for guitars that are pretty much fully hollow, say for a center block, they always surprise me somewhat, and they all tend to sound like a banjo unplugged. The first thing that left out of me about this 335 is that the only guitar that I can kind of really compare it to that I've played is an Epiphone Casino, which of course by comparison is fully hollow without that center block, and as such responds and feels much more like a traditional acoustic guitar. There's a body and a warmth and a resonance to this 335 that honestly I don't think I've ever encountered in another. So interest well and truly peaked. Started taking a closer look at the guitar. It's worth remembering I'd not even plugged it in at this point. And it was at this point that I noticed the Bless It is clearly a bit of a mess. It's obviously had a refin, albeit a pretty good one if I'm honest. It's not a colour that leaps out at you as being kind of wrong for the period or anything like that. It's certainly not like my orange 62 Strat, with its finish like the surface of the moon. It's a pretty good refin, but the original bridge is missing. However, despite having had this guitar for a good couple of months at this point, I am still totally in the dark as to what the hell happened to it at various points throughout its life to necessitate such extensive repairs. There are cracks and marks and dings and bangs and dents all over the bloody thing. Honestly, if it had come with its original case, which sadly it didn't, really wouldn't surprise me if it had had Pete Townsend stenciled on the side of it. All I can think is that maybe it's been run over or something fairly catastrophic has happened to this guitar at some point in its life, but someone's clearly lovingly put it back together. Next up is the binding on the bass side, which you can clearly see has been replaced at some point in its life. It's totally the wrong colour, especially when you compare it to the binding on the treble side, but more obviously the dot markers mysteriously just disappear towards the top of the neck. Keep working your way up that neck and you'll see that not only have the inlays been replaced, but the neck profile has been fairly significantly sanded down at some point, so it's quite a skinny neck, which again, traditionally I'm not massively a fan of. But it's when you work your way up to the headstock, you'll find that not only has it had a break, not uncommon for a 63-year-old Gibson, it's also had a headstock replacement. Again, no idea what catastrophic event befell this guitar to necessitate such a drastic change, but there it is, a headstock replacement on a Gibson, albeit pretty well done, and it does say Gibson on the top of it at the very least. So all in all, I think you can probably agree, a bit of a dog's dinner of a guitar. So why on earth did I buy it? Well, firstly, aside from its many issues, there really are multiple, it is an outstandingly good instrument. It really is an incredible guitar, and I connected with it immediately, and there is so much to be said for that. I guess somewhat slightly more cynically or pragmatically, should we say, to put it diplomatically, somehow, despite all of its many modifications and repairs over the years, it still has its original electronics. Crucially, PAFs from 1962, which if you're sad like me and even vaguely up on the prices that these things kind of currently fetch, probably appreciate why that was a fairly important part of the guitar. So I guess as much as I was in love with it, what happened next wouldn't have transpired if I wasn't aware of the fact that the constituent parts of this guitar were worth a fair amount. As I mentioned earlier, we'd actually been on tour around Europe with Miles Kennedy, and it was in a little kind of break in that tour that I had a chance to actually film with this guitar. But the day of the auction itself was the day that we'd set aside to drive over to Ireland to resume the tour with Miles in Dublin, catching the Holyhead to Dublin ferry in the middle of Storm Dara as well. That was great fun in and of itself. But the bidding process for the guitar, bouncing around in the back of a van, driving up through rural mid-Wales, turned out to be quite eventful. But first and foremost, I'd never actually bought anything from Garden Holgate. Generally speaking, I can't afford to, so I'm frantically trying to register the bid or figure out how to register the bid in the back of the van. Clearly, this wasn't something that I put a great deal of thought into actually doing. It was a bit of a spur-of-the-moment decision. The guitar had been giving me sleepless nights, but I'd found reasons to justify not even kind of showing any interest. You know, all the usual reasons why you do. Can't afford it, time is wrong, etc., etc., etc. You'll always find reasons not to do something in that case. But this was slightly unusual for me, I guess, a fit of passion in the moment, which inspired me to register the bid and then endure an absolutely excruciating 20 minutes of diabolical phone signal trying to watch the auction underway. It kicked off at 10 a.m. with lot 501, the first lot of the day, and 515 was my 335. 501 to 514 just about cracked along on terrible phone signal until the key moment when, of course, totally lost any trace of reception whatsoever. It just totally cut out and stopped working. A frantic, what felt like an eternity, I guess in reality was probably a minute or so, of diving around in the back of the van, holding the phone in the air, trying to get signal, trying to make anything work by any hook or by crook. It eventually kicked back in with Luke, the auctioneer, saying, going once, going twice at £4,200. Now, I had no idea what was actually going up for auction at this point. There was nothing clearly on screen, and bear in mind I'm also watching this on a phone, to clearly denote what was going under the hammer. So I just instinctively, in a moment of sheer panic, pressed automatic bid £4,400. Thankfully, there was enough phone signal for the bid to register. Luke's arc of the gavel never completed its travel. He said, oh, we've had a bid, £4,400, going once, going twice, gone. Now, at this point, I was the proud new owner of... I had no idea. As I said, there was nothing to clearly denote what I'd been bidding for. And as far as I knew, I might have been the new proud owner of the world's most expensive accordion or something. But thankfully, his next words were lot 516. So I was now the proud, somewhat terrified, somewhat dumbstruck owner of a 1962, somewhat 335. A few days later, when we got back from tour, I swung by Garden Holgate to pick up the guitar, and thankfully, it was every bit as good as I'd remembered. I'd kind of convinced myself out of sheer terror at this point that it was all a dream, it wasn't that great, and I'd made a terrible, terrible mistake. But thankfully, it was every bit as good as I'd remembered it, and I threw it straight into action a couple of days later, the Cozy Pal tribute night that we do every year up in Wolverhampton. And honestly, it is just sublime. It is such a good guitar, despite being a total mess. There are, however, a couple of things that I'm going to look to remedy on it. I'm going to get Hugh Price on it. Of course, a name you may recognise from the restoration number 62, funnily enough, Stratocaster. First among which is that binding. It feels okay under the fingers, but seeing it glaring up at you like a set of false teeth is a little bit off-putting. So I'm going to get that remedied in some way, shape or form to be at least a little bit more in-fitting, or in-keeping, I should say, with the rest of the guitar. As I said, it is a refin. And despite somewhat devastatingly, whoever did that refin not masking over the F-hole, so they've actually sprayed over the sticker inside the guitar, telling you the serial number and the model number. You can still just kind of make things out, but That's a bit of a sad point. But as I said, the refin is pretty good, so I'm not overly worried about that. And despite the headstock being whatever it is, certainly non-original to the guitar, it holds tune and plays absolutely stupendously. So there's not a whole lot of stuff I want to really do to it, but just tidy it up, I guess, before I look to take this out on tour, which I guess is an important part of this. If this was a kind of a mint or an even decent condition 1962 335, not only would I not been able to afford it in a month of Sundays, but I certainly would have been too terrified to even take it anywhere near a tour bus. So the fact that I've got this cheap, it's certainly not cheap, but it's cheaper, I guess, ultimately than a custom shop, a new 335, does give me a little bit of license just to take it out and actually enjoy playing what is a truly stupendous guitar. Keep you posted on the kind of progress of what happens to it next, but I still wanted to document it as it currently is and tell you the somewhat bizarre story of how this guitar came to be in my possession. I'm Chris Buck. I'm going to play you out now. As ever, thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, hit the bell icon if you haven't already, and I shall see you soon for another video. Cheers, guys. Take care.
I'm on my own without you.